The impact of sanctions on the Russian government and oligarchs, as we've pointed out in our market segment, is having a significant and material impact on the value of its businesses. Russia is among the world's largest producers of gas, coal, oil, aluminium, nickel, wheat and palladium. So the sanctions have the potential to disrupt global trade as well. Let's bring in here UTS Professor and Chief Economist Tim Harcourt, host of the Airport Economist. Tim, thanks for your time as always. Just tell me, do these sanctions jeopardise potentially the global economy because almost as collateral damage in the effort to hurt Russia?
Well, you're right, Ross. I mean, these are unprecedented in their breadth and scope, and the fact that almost every country has put the sanctions on Russia in the support of Ukraine. I think we expected something on Russia's exports and imports, but the fact we've got SWIFT affecting their financial system, the attacks on the central bank's reserves, and the actual physical sanctions against the oligarchs who fly around Europe on their private planes and in their private yachts in the Mediterranean, means they're pretty widespread. And that's just the official sanctions before you get into what Apple's doing with poor old Boris and Natasha trying to get on the subway with their Apple phones.
Yeah, it's true, but here in Australia, of course, the sanctions don't necessarily have a direct impact. Where the impact will be seen is in the price of goods. So it doesn't matter whether it's the price of wheat, because Ukraine is also a major grower of wheat, and that's going to be disrupted in this coming growing season, or whether it's sanctions on Russian wheat, for example, the third largest wheat producer in the world. So wheat producers here potentially going to see higher prices coming in the next 12 months or so. It comes to the price of nickel. Australia is a major producer of nickel or gas. So it's going to be in price, not necessarily in the volume of what we sell.
That's right, Ross. I mean, ironically, Australia's export profile, if you like, is very similar to Russia when you think about oil, natural gas, aluminum, palladium. And it's very similar to the Ukraine in terms of agriculture. I think, Ukraine has 70% of the world's most fertile soil. So actually, having sanctions as well as the impact of the war on those commodities means the prices will rise, be actually quite good for Australian farmers and resource exporters. But if you get overall disruption to our trading partners, particularly in the Asia Pacific, countries like South Korea and Japan and China that are net importers of energy, then that could impact us negatively. But directly, it could be a positive. And as you say, two-way trade between Russia and Australia is not very big. It's a bit of vodka and a few sunflower seeds and a few kangaroos the other way. So the direct impact is actually not big at all.
Okay, then there's one other aspect of this, because Australia is in a position where it's very hard to crank up production of wheat or of mineral exports, for example. So we may have to simply accept the price because we might not be able to answer the supply side shortages that could occur as a result of the sanctions.
Yeah, I mean, in those commodities, we tend to be price takers rather than price makers. It could be too that, if there is a disruption of Russian natural gas to Europe, 20% of German energy is powered by Russian gas, then that could be an alternative in the long run, possible market for Australia. We know that there's already been movements to have Qatar natural gas going to Europe as an alternative to Russia. So you're going to see a real shifting of a lot of the trade connections we're used to seeing as a result of the disruption to Russia from the Russia-Ukraine crisis.
Well, when you were the economist at Austrade, of course, you travelled to many of these countries, experienced even many of these people, including Vladimir Putin himself. You've asked him about the relevance of Australia in the past, haven't you?
I did. Look, when he came to APEC in 2007, he was the first Russian head of state ever to come to Australia. Not even the Tsar came here. And I said to him, what do you think of Australia? Is it what you thought it would be like? And he said, I never think about Australia. So that was that.
That's it. He doesn't think about Australia. So in terms of that, though, the fact that Australia has joined the Western coalition, and just briefly, it still means that at least Australia is going to be on the radar if there's action coming back the other way.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be getting a Christmas card from the Kremlin, but for the most part, it'll be seen as Russia versus the West. And the interesting thing is to what extent China and India have played a bit of a hedging role in this whole crisis. It's very interesting to see how they've moved or not.
I'll tell you what, Tim Harcourt, always good to have in the program. Lovely to get your perspective today, and many thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ross. Spasiba.